Shirley here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Mercury, our Saturn day. Mercury is already 3 degrees Libra, getting close to the point of the eclipse. The midheaven is conjoining Ketu, where we would have the eclipse, and the moon is 10 degrees Virgo. The ascendant is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter in the 8th house, 21 degrees. Cancer ascendant, 6 degrees. Sagittarius, close to my Ketu. And I want to see what are the energies that are coming, because before this eclipse there's so much Venus squaring Uranus right now, conjoining Regulus. So just think about the fact that Regulus is squaring Uranus, in conjuncting Saturn, Neptune, in conjuncting Pluto. Regulus is about fame, recognition. In fact, one of my first responses to a talisman a colleague did was, I was just looking at the picture of the Regulus talisman in the website, and then immediately there was a comment that I wrote. I think it was on Twitter or X, and immediately I was noticed. I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. That it's about fame, and I just write something, and the immediate thing was that the person that did a talisman was rather busy and hardly a line noticed that. So right now, the troubled position is basically causing fame, nobility, okay? To get the odd kind of attention and anything Gregorian, okay? So you think about monarchies, Norwegian king, a king or prince or somebody in the royal family there, exposed for sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. People, now I'm a bit more aware of that because Aries, that is the planet of the disincluded. It's also the planet of the elite. So, because it's the Ubermensch planet. So I'm more aware, it's next to my Mercury, and I'm more aware of the jabs that people that are associated with the bloodline of the nobility get. Okay? For example, I was thinking, like, why is it called black nobility? The people are so white. And this is exactly the troubled position of Regulus. It's squaring Uranus, so people rebel, expose, jab at the nobility. It is in conjuncting Saturn and Neptune, so there is some sort of restriction on what is happening. The conjoined karma for secret societies, which is simply the accumulation of actions and opening of a cycle. Probably they don't think about it differently than we do, so there's no point to idealize and devaluate here. It's just like a closing cycle. What the mafia did in the past 28 years, what the mafia did in the past 450 years, conjoining accumulation of actions, rethinking, and moving on. That's what it means. Neptune, okay? It is a dual form, and that is in conjunct to monarchies. Basically, secret societies. This is also the time of the French Revolution, where the secret societies were fighting in amongst themselves, but also outrowing the very monarchies that their nobility bloodlines are associated with, because they are basically considered aristocracy. And in conjuncting Pluto. So Pluto is out of bounds, and basically the main predictions for Pluto in Aquarius is those that are the farthest from the sun. So it's not just the we the people, as the Masons love to put that, but it's actually those that were not so visible. And those that were not so visible begin to be more the stars of the show, okay, and tap into their power, because visibility can give a lot of troubles, but also a lot of power. Think about the Me Too. It started with actresses that say, hey, I was missing from the screen. At the uptick of social media, suddenly they had a platform to say, I was missing from the screen because so and so happened in the industry. They were used to being vulnerable. They were actually trained and even tortured to be vulnerable and open in front of camera. Um, Whereas, let's say the woman that weren't had to suddenly gain from their openness, but there were probably many, 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 many women and men that that are not, definitely will not open up emotionally, with vulnerability. And think about all the men, because all these things were done to men first in the Masons and other fraternities. Um, because those fraternities did not involve women, and that was their freedom initiation, so to speak. So they're probably not as, it's not probably not as accessible for them to openly say, "This is my name. This is what happened to me." In fact, they would be considered a loser. They and if they would be raping somebody else, not the person that raped them, they would be considered the winner. Um, and their wiener is slowly waning because of those practices. Um, but actually, I remember when I looked in academia, um, it's going to be very relevant for this Pluto, and I learned about the brain, which is neuroactivity, which is more Aquarius, neural activity. And there was a chapter about people that watch porn, and he said that people that watch porn get addicted to porn. Again, they would only be susceptible to get addicted to porn if there was something in the upbringing that plays on a certain fantasy. And then they would be addicted to more violent scenarios, come from dopamine rather than oxytocin, the entire both unlearning but also um, preserving cocktail that would also balance their sleep cycle. And they would lose their ability to have an erection at like 20. And I said, that can't be true. But men around me were like, yeah, we know that. It's like a known thing. I'm like, really? Yeah. I just instinctively had the gnosis that I don't want anything external um, to affect what I do when I self pleasure or when I have sex. Then, but apparently, I was sharing that gnosis with people that tried and fucked around and found out. Um, so that was a way to access through the Aquarius and the science in a way that is invisible to others. It's kind of like, hey, that's not going to do good for the brain. And that was a way to access even the therapy methods that were offered to men, would drain them into Scientology because they promised them that they don't have to speak about what happened. Nobody prepared them for the crossing of the threshold where you can't stop speaking about what happened. um, and as men, this would be when they would be life threatened because they took an oath not to talk about what happened. Um, so, which would also expose the fact that I had to perpetuate that, and so on and so forth. Um, Secret society, and think about the many women feminists that wanted to be a part of that. So, it's almost so that there were lodges for women. Um, Now, the in conjunction with an out of bounds Pluto is basically people tap into their power in the face of everything famous. Because Regulus is fame. Um, Now, what is the challenging thing is that Pluto also exposing that which is powerful is even more often than not that which is famous. Okay, there's power to visibility, but it is the power that is about vulnerability. But the more stagnant fungal type of power is actually the power of invisibility. Why am I saying stagnant and fungal? Where the sun is, okay, well, for example, past hospitals, if you would go to the Dead Sea, the good old hotels still have a solarium. And the point is that the radiation of the sun curates the skin. Why does it curate the skin? Because it's creating movement in those invisible stagnant places. And because it is the Dead Sea, then of course it's more protected with the radiation. Yes, don't do that in California or something. That is, yeah, come over to the Dead Sea and rebel the Houthis. I don't know. Don't. The place is infested by Satanists, I heard. So, this guy, like, how common it is in California to find a person who's like, "What's your problem in life? You got everything." Yeah, I've sold my. People sell their soul, and they have to replace it with another every 7 years or so. And that's like, why did you have to accumulate those problems? One in material wealth. Okay. First, if that is helpful to anybody. Um, but secondly, it definitely puts in proportion other people's problems. And yes, a lot of them have been MK Ultra since birth. So, and MK often. That's a new word I learned yesterday. Um, so what's happening to this Regulus is that um, the inconjunct kind of brings both an angle on that out of bounds Pluto and Regulus that is volatile. So think about, oh, there's certain blowers exposing, let's say, famous singers, famous actors, famous this, famous that. Amazing. Then they're like, oh, wait, but that guy's an informant. They're doing this. Okay. So this is with the Pluto, it's going to purge out everything. And this is where the sun gets to shed its light. So Regulus is a solar fixed star. The sun gets to shade its light at the stagnant power that has been invisible, that perhaps without the sun wouldn't get to begin with um, to do certain things, whereas with the sun, um, because it was said to be visible, then basically there were hidden things like extortion cults that were taking place in invisible ways. This is why Scorpio, for example, squares Leo, because Scorpio is what's underneath the ground, and Leo is what we can see. Okay, we can see who is in the Epstein list. We can't see those who did the mind control and the invisible MK Oftens, um, or the invisible psychedelic, induced psychosis. It's also of a scorpionic type because induced psychosis is about, yes, it's about drugs and dissociation, but it's about bringing what's in the depth of the well onto the surface. And it can be used both to curate and to heal, or to put a child next to the person when they are in induced purgatory psychosis and put a camera in front of the faces of them. And they're inclined to rape that child. Um, by the way, induced psychosis is also done from afar on people. Um, so when it's done on therapists, then you can imagine the horrors. Um, so that's Venus. And it really sparks up this out of bound Pluto, because it's a once in 3,000 years type of Pluto in Aquarius. For example, French Revolution was not with an out of bound Pluto. Okay, it was 300 years ago, not 3,000 years ago. The American Revolution, not out of bounds Pluto. J.P. Morgan Chase, not out of bounds Pluto. Okay, he had a Pluto in Aquarius. Now, out of bounds is kind of an out of bounds planet is simply a planet that is not bound to the rest of the bunch when it's doing its thing. For example, a lot of us have out of bounds moon, and that means that for example, this is the age where we discovered about emotional eating, emotional intelligence, the importance of not regulating our emotions, but adjusting the environment to the individual. Astrology, astrological magic, they're all facets of this out of bounds moon that we have to appease, otherwise we don't get to do the other things. Okay, think about it. Person that have emotional volatility, if they don't address that, they can't work, they can't have a relationship, um, they can't pay the rent, and so on and so forth. But they're also not expected to be subdued by medicine. Okay, because that's the moon. Um, they would have to actually get to know their emotions and understand what is the real reality that those emotions are responding to. Um, that's an out of bound moon's role. Now think about an out of bounds Pluto. What was Pluto doing in Aquarius? Decentralizing regimes, having the farthest from the sun, the farthest from the monarchy, standing in power in the face of the visible, which also entailed the sun reaching places it hadn't previously reached. Okay? Think about what they're going to find in the tunnels underneath Gaza City, Palestine. For 70 something years, that place was considered an open air prison, and people had to, whichever guerrilla would have to dig the underground as well. I'm getting slave trade. Yeah. So think about the fact that Afghanistan, for example, is a trafficking zone for that is involved with the United States, and it's maintained by what? Religious fundamentalism, which is of course a mask to human trafficking. Um, that is even, it's kind of like, hey, when a secular human trafficker gets caught, it's like wear a kippah, wear a kufiyah, wear a cross, and you're good. Now those dressings, look at Venus in the sign of clothing when I speak about it. Those dressings are being exposed. Uh, Trafficking litigations against the Mormons, involvement of United States in trafficking in Afghanistan, and a lot of the anti-Semitism is about this costume where, where people were trafficking, wear penguin suits, keep trafficking. It brings money to Haredi Jew, later than say it is charity and donated to supposedly the poor that they also use in rituals. Same with Mormons, same with Islam, same with any orthodoxy. And that's like, well, why is there anti-Semitism in the world? First, let's get rid of the traffickings. The woman rights of a Haredi woman are non-existent. She doesn't even have a normal phone. It's kind of like the Mormons. She doesn't even have a normal phone where she can contact or Google something or have a conversation. Um, Everything is so guarded and so secluded, and most of them were born into that. They never chose that. Um, there are many rituals done that we don't even know of. And again, the people can be very. I lived amongst Haredi people, common people. They're very, very nice people. All in all, just like the Mormons, are usually people that want to do good, go on their Mormon missions. Even when I was wearing like a normal dress, summer dress, the people always greeted me nicely, and even the women um, said to me that I look nice in the dress, like never trying to oppress me. The one time that they did was a socially engineered scenario when I did a channeling experiment, and then they acted like the Nazis. So there was probably an informant that acted like a Nazi within the society, which means he's probably a human trafficker under the guise of a Haredi person. And for the people that run into those things, for them it's like, okay, I guess that's the Jews, I guess that's the Mormons, I guess that's and as they say about Islam, okay, the non-Orthodox are kind of like the coverage for the Orthodox, and Pluto out of bounds in Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn, it's about Orthodoxy, but non-Orthodox is also about uncovering those. It's about, hey, you're even I met a pagan Satanist that yes, left was human trafficked and had a problem acknowledging that people are satanically ritually abused. And her response was more important to her to protect her Satan God. And I'm like, no, probably she's not you doing rituals of bloodletting and raping children. And like, I give that credit to her. I don't think that she's working Satan in that way. But I said, very simply put, in the spirit of Pluto and Aquarius, don't expect your God to not be abominated or cursed, or for people to bash your God when you ignore ritual or literally talk about the actual trafficking victims. When it's kind of like, hey, if Satan protects you from being satanically ritually abused by the elite or something like that, then at least what you can do is, I don't know what's the equivalent in Satanism to kind of like, hey, thank Satan and say, my God, Satan saved me from those things or something like that. Um, but no, they went full blown weird, and because they were a victim of human trafficking themselves, um, there was not much you could hold them accountable um, for it. Without yes, it's kind of like, hey, that person is probably suffering through a shit ton of triggers already. So, but that was not an easy conversation, and a lot of people are going to have such not easy conversations because for many people their God was their savior from trafficking, and now they're going to run into the people that were trafficked in the name of God. Pluto out of bounds, those things would happen within Utah, within Israel, within Mecca, um, within the secret societies themselves, but also the role of technology. And I think we see that already. Pluto in the sign of technology is the conjoining of technology and the taboo topics, which are usually also the sexual topics. Think about when you go through your day, you're not being watched, You just go through your day. Then usually nobody sees you. And for most people, the most that they'll do is kind of boring. They'll pick their nose, they'll look for a toilet paper to put the thing where they do. We kind of look like Mr. Bean when we're not washed. Um, if I think about that, the first thing I thought about when I was discovering that through satellites I can be observed in my previous apartment was, well, I pick my nose, I have pubic hair. Like, I was not even concerned about it. I was not even thinking to like stop walking naked in my own apartment because some some guy can watch it to a satellite, and I'm like, okay, fine. We have kind of like people go to a nudist beach. There's nothing in Rimini as usual. It's normal. Um, um, I'm like, okay, age of air, everything is exposed. Then I have a body. They have a body. I think. I hope. I don't know. They probably have genitals. Like, it's nothing to be ashamed of. What I was not seeing coming is the Nazi ideology behind the Watchers. And this is. And so, even the problems that we're like, okay, Pluto in the age of air, everything is going to be transparent. Um, and people, yes, people might think about Aquarius is kind of like you think about a nudist beach. You think about um, okay, this open space. You think about a very non-hierarchic type of okay, and it is still ruled by Saturn, so there's still structure. And then you say, okay, oh, the government is watching you everywhere and blah 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 blah. I'm like, okay, fine. Like, they got nothing to do in life. I mean, it's probably some of the most boring content they could ever watch. Um, but then they actually waste our tax money not on housing first and believing the patient, which could prevent, for example, invasion, nuclear bomb, nuclear holocaust, mass shootings. We had Charlie Kirk, whether you like him or hate him, that's what killed him. Um, and many, many other things. In Israel, 7th of October. I don't know. I mean, it could. Um, think about if Israel tended to the ritual abuse within its borders, it would be like a vacuum. Be like a vacuum of peace. It's kind of like the Palestinians will not have what to attack. It's like, this is a peaceful nation. They would want to apply for a blue ID. In fact, most of them still wanted to. And it was like, why attack this country? Like, if we can get a green card, why attack this country? Anybody wants a green card today? I think it's kind of like anybody wants a green card to Birkenau, because that's what the United States is looking like right now. It's now looking pretty. Um, and no, it's not Donald Trump. It started in Biden's. Biden was a part of the MK Ultra. Donald Trump just didn't stop it, but actually enhanced that. Um, so it's not a blue pill, red pill. It's Brazilian pill. But anybody who would take the place of the Brazil, sorry, Brazil, it's like YouTube has this. Think about people 1,000 years from now, remnants of zeros and ones, interpreted into something that they can translate into their own thinking language, and are like, Brazil at the time was playing an important role in financing both sides of a civil war and a conflict, and the people began to stand in their power in the face of the Brazilians. If you don't know what is Brazilians, um, I recommend you to check up on your bank account details and get connected with planet Earth sooner than later. If you're not able to do that because you need to set a date with your bank, um, then now you are at least aware of what Brazilians are. Um, so this is an out of bounds Pluto, which means that it is going to address um, never before seen attempts to have levels of control never before seen. But this is the sign of revolution, which basically means that the things that we didn't think exist are being exposed, and Googleplex people have to deal with things that were once thought as a delusion. Um, I remember, for example, actually during the Me Too, I saw one of the reasons that I didn't file a complaint, other than wanting to heal, and the justice system is not about vengeance, it's about curation of something, um, was it was kind of like me, the child, was seeing the person that did that, and it looked funny and robotic, but I also noticed I looked at it like holistic medicine, and it had tics, and tics were usually ascribed to a person who's constantly being watched. And probably the word is trained occultist that was controlled by the government, or what was not the government, it's those personality cults, intelligence. Um, and I was told, oh, they're bitchonist. I didn't know what it is because bitachon means security. So I was like, they're security person. Okay, I was like, okay. The dissociation. And in retrospective, they were both targeting individuals, but they were basically a targeted individual and having tics because they were constantly watched 24/7. Which means they were surrounded very likely with some astral activity. Um, and yeah, um, that had to do with trafficking and probably Epstein's and so on. So, and 7th of October and many, many nice things that are now called genocide, false flags, democide, crimes against humanity. Um, so now, when I was, dealing with that as a person that they were basically programmed to try to traffic or something, um, I was just trying to recover. But it's kind of me, the child me was like, that looks so weird. That's so weird. And I had no idea that that those things are happening to people on that level. Now there are Googleplex people dealing with that, and it's called MK Ultra and MK Often. Okay, so just imagine the situation before this Pluto out of bounds in Aquarius, where I was the one person that had the intelligence that there was not just like a sexual harassment, there was an entire thing going on, and people tried to find the right wording to describe that, kind of name it, to tame it, and so on. There was a psychic, creating psychic rapport, and then trying to maneuver the energy draining things in the astral that I thought are probably nonsense and were not. um, in a lot of things. And at the same time, they were trying to normalize forced trafficking in academia. We had the case of the dean, and they were using that case to try to normalize that. Um, so I walked the fuck out of there. And in the beginning, it just looks like a person who's dealing with a shit ton of trauma. So like, okay, they're gonna come, they're gonna get over that. They're going to be normal. Like they're going through something. Like you don't understand what is happening. You definitely don't think that somebody is trying to normalize trafficking so that they can traffic you, and use psychic warfare to do that. Um, and they're not fully in control when they do that. Um, and you're like, and you have nowhere to go. Because those people, not only that, in the beginning, it's like, oh, they're connected in the court system, they're connected into this, they're connected into that. And later, it's like, who's going to understand what's going on? That is sci-fi level of dumbfuckery. and and I need to both set my boundaries in the face of that sci-fi level of dumbfuckery. And yes, and then stop that. Uh, and now there is Googleplex people aware of like, yeah, there. Oh yeah, in United States, everyone now and then there's this trafficking campaigns and spiritual warfare, and I'm like, United States is living on space. They know all these things. It's like, yeah, born there. Oh, so was MK Ultra, which is the psychic MK Ultra. So they're like living in a galactic slave trade, rebelling that for like in the last century at least. Yeah, God bless Americans. There are more targeted individuals in the US than individuals. Now you say, what about the Europeans? Actually, I remember, because I tend to this topic of, don't ask me how. I don't know how that happened. But the people that are, kind of like the visible, the media people, um, are considered the elite, and some of them even post pictures of the wife with the baby in her belly, so they're like, she's not cloned. It's not a clone. Yeah, I didn't. Yes, I remember when Beyonce did that, and I was like, I didn't get what the point was of like, okay, she's having a baby. I had no idea about the conversation. Indeed, there are clone people. So, and they use rituals to take the creative power of the womb to create it, which is basically very rapey. And it's an understatement. Um, and that's actually like totally unnecessary. But also, those things happen. And then, of course, those people are aware, they're psychically aware because they go through, unfortunately, so much trauma, and they go into the psychic awareness through trauma. Now, I look at the normal advertisement about the work week being reduced in Netherlands to 4 days work week, 8 hours a day, and me and an energy of a person, whether they're a clone or not, um, looks at this and is like, the commoners, those that are supposed to call losers, are just working 8 hours a day for 4 days, and they can be off to their life, to their work-life balance, ride bicycle, have a drink, and not go through what the elite is going through and is supposed to call them losers. And it was an actual moment because I was paying attention to that, and I was like, those commoners. Whereas the people that were either targeted individuals or the people in the elite themselves having to, accommodate for these common people, while being completely, totally enslaved, and being indoctrinated that they are the free winners and those that aren't with them or like them are the losers. In Netherlands, the emoji clown means clone. I didn't know that. I remember the first time I did that, and I was like, You know, I was, the Dutchified. I was Dutchified, and I was going to write clown to put that emoji, and it's like somebody, like Phil Landers, like being really offended by me doing that move, and I'm like, what happened? I was like, no, that's cloned. It's not clown. It's clone. And anybody who's like in the media or journalism or close to that, I would be severely triggered by that. And I had no idea. So this was just how different people see reality, and it's by the channeling experiment and telepathy that I was exposed to that. Pluto in Aquarius is the power of telepathy, and then people try to control people through being watched or through telepathy. It's like it's going to make them feel bad about themselves. What it actually induces is radical acceptance, because most people across humanity, I think, can safely say that those Epsteins probably have more to hide. So whatever it is we were doing, and however many times people forgot to wash their hands after the bathroom, it's not anywhere near as embarrassing as those Epstein tapes. um, and what happens is that Googleplex people now deal with a problem that was a problem of the few that were aristocracy, elite, chosen ones, um, free people, and now Googleplex people are dealing with that and rebelling. And as well as being informed that those practices are derived from indigenous practices refined. Like MK often is just all the witches and warlocks unite, but to target individuals. Um, so probably indigenous were people would say, "Hey, look at this white Karen," blah 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 blah, and I guess their ancestors didn't warn them enough or something. Um, yeah, because when people are secluded, you see people living in those big mansions, and because they are indeed slaves, they they don't understand the people, the working routine of the common people. And so um, because they really do, um, they really are slaves, okay? They really are in slavery. And so they don't understand the working routine of the common people, um, and they live in these big mansions. Some of them really believe that because they work so hard, they have what they have, not really aware of the other factors. Um, and again, they definitely do work hard and so on, but also they're looking at the commoners in a weird way. The commoners looking at them as like they have these big mansions. I will never be a nobility. I will never be a this. I will never be a that. I was like, thank God. You will never be a clone. Amazing. Um, but also not really understanding that, hey, the common people begin to deal with being targeted as well. Any of us just a couple of years ago had an Illuminati in their DM and kind of said, okay, that's probably spam. Um, you can tell that those were the businesses that don't get too much exposure in the algorithm, at the very least. Um, Actually, there were many things I was not, informed of. Because you see social media and you're like, okay, why don't people just open a page on social media, present themselves, promote their business? And it's like, well, Illuminati is in everyone's DM right now. They knew it before social media because they would have Illuminati in their mailbox or something. I don't know. Or they had to rape a child to get a certification as a therapist of children. Um, and if there would be a good one, an exceptionally good one, either they would be tortured or they would be exposed. Um, yes, that's how extortion cults work. It's supposed to keep people um, in those. Now, Pluto Aquarius, because it's a JP Morgan Chase. Okay, JP Morgan had Pluto in Aquarius. Out of bound in Pluto in Aquarius is given JP Morgan Chase, but on BlackRock. And indeed, a female founder, I don't know if she's female or trans or whatnot, a female CEO of BlackRock was assassinated. Most people did not hear about that. And this is rejuvenation even in those, which means that there are going to be an even more megalithic attempts to JP Morgan Chase or to BlackRock, which are going to be met with the equal opposite power reaction um, of the Aquarian archetypes and Aquarian placements. For example, when Pluto ingressed into Aquarius, my first predictions, other than people get out of the Masons if you can, get out of the lodges if you can, was, and again, I was not saying it, like most of my colleagues were Masons, probably most of my parts of the family were Masons. Only reason I was not going into a female lodge is simply because of the secrecy thingy. And I knew nothing. Everybody that I learned, all the politicians, the Enlightenment, all the cool folks were Masons. Um, so I just thought that's the cool Enlightenment stuff. That's where all the important people are doing cool science and innovation. Like, and I really had no idea what is this. So when I said folk can get out of the lodges, it was like really predicting and seeing that hey, most people are not feeding on endochrome, which is something that I learned new. Like most of them are not doing those dumb fuckery practices. Um, at least in the lower ranks, they do go through a lot of rites that are terrible. If they're Luciferian, it's a bit more problematic because of the what is done in academia. Um, It's not a bit more problematic, it's beyond problematic. It actually nullifies, it's actually worse than the Cultural Revolution, because in the Cultural Revolution people were assassinated. Here people were, to begin with, dissociated from their own gnosis. Um, and it's, yes, and the effect is basically nullifying the American science and the Ivy League, whatever comes out of the Ivy League. Um, so ritual rapes in fraternities, that's what I'm talking about. And the other prediction would be that healthcare personnel and bankers and banks would be assassinated, which indeed happens. Again, it was the aftermath of COVID. Saturn went through Aquarius. People had the time to science up, because karma to the sciences was ensuing. And the people began, after, think about people taking a booster shot after booster shot after booster shot, having long COVID maybe because they were targeted. And then it's like taking their minerals and vitamins. Oh, 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 that. Oh. Um, and none of the booster shots helping to prevent things. So much so that perhaps the side effects cannot be discerned of whether it was the long COVID or the booster shots. The amount of dumbfuckery. Okay, I was a researcher from the philosophic point of view and applied philosophy of science, and that was beyond the dumbfuckery. So with Pluto in Aquarius, people understand, hey, those that are left in those systems by now, either they are under the counter assisting people to get to escape from the death camps, or to escape from the Mengele, or they are the Mengeles in which it is a Pflicht, okay, it's a must, man muss murder them. Okay, one must murder them if they can, because Dr. Mengele, one must murder. And indeed, this is what happens. And no amount of security will be in their favor, which brings to the enforcing. Okay, if people, let's say, are enforcement in the Nazi, for example, there were a lot of open positions of people to be the ticket people on the bus, and I just paid attention to how this work is done, and I'm like, there's something really unfair about the fact that it's public transportation during wartime. I don't think that it would be ethical to report on not having a ticket to the bus. So to begin with, I did not opt to partake in this job. Other people that have more coverage, that have, I don't know, lawyer friends or that have guerrilla warrior friends, could become these supposed capos and then let people off. Okay, but they're gonna need, like, it's not something that one can do alone. They're gonna need people that vouch for them, and then that's a great thing, like to take the money from the system and to let people off the hook. I might even try that in the future. Okay, so not to give the report to people, because it was quavering between, hey, that position in itself is illegal, um, to, if there are Nazis, then I would rather be the person that lets people out of the ghetto, or lets people, or allows people to move from place to place, and let the money of the system be funneled to me, which means that I might, you know what, I might even apply for such a job, um, and see how it works, um, because this is something that, yes, but those people that don't act like, that are not letting people off the hook in these times, they could be assassinated, and rightfully so. And those are the ethical questions. Okay, in such a regime, should you take the money and funnel it to actually negate the population control agenda, or should you altogether not rebel against the very role? It's a question. Now, because there are fiscal things involved with that, I think that actually to get a job and let people off the hook and funnel that money to save children or to cooperate with people that help people escape of death and concentration camp can be a good choice, because this is the J.P. Morgan Chase. For example, during the Second World War, the people that had placements in the last decan of Aquarius, the way that they saved themselves from downfall, because this can bring a downfall due to an issue around children, is a lunar nakshatra. And for example, Charlie Kirk's Saturn, okay, there was the Epstein ring, and he was a diversion tactic, and then Saturn is death, and he was assassinated. He died basically, so that people will talk about Charlie Kirk and not about Epstein list and Donald Trump being in it. So I'm the first person who talks about the behind the scenes, the mind control, that is, but it's also true. Like he basically had a Saturn there, and he died because of a misfortune around children. Um, Saturn rules time, so that was the timing of the assassination, the timing of this. Vulcan, of course, it's ruled by Saturn. Yeah. Um, but the people that saved the children, the 669, the people that saved the children from the Nazi death and concentration camps, some of them were people that were working in the finance sector, and they could, because they needed to bribe people, um, and so that was a great remedy, because a lot of them not only did not have a downfall, but they're known as heroes across they basically have a legacy. That if they would just be doing their jobs and obeying orders, they would have another type of, they would not even be known because we're not famous enough to be known. But those that would be famous enough to be known would be like, think about the children of the Holocaust and the Nazis that were associated with that. Okay, so um, yeah, so this is where I have to get my bony ass to funnel resources to those purposes. Pluto out of bounds would be me saying that live and thinking with you. Um, yeah, and I think that actually starting off as a person that checks the tickets is a good start. Now, of course, the people are targeted individuals. The MK often the this, the that. It challenges people's ability to work. But for this cause, I may attempt to work and see what happens. Israel is a horrible country for me to work. My sixth house in general is not looking pretty. Um, but perhaps just because maybe that intention in mind can remediate that. I don't know. Um, by the way, my lot of entrapment is next to the ruler of my sixth house, which is which rules pets, but also being an employee. And perhaps saving people from entrapment can be remediating. So I will let you guys know. But I think that's what I'm going to do first thing in the morning tomorrow. Um, and and funnily enough, my sun is ruled by Venus, and sun is ruler of the sixth, and this is Venus in that in conjunct, and me thinking with you about taking that hate a job and letting people off the hook through that. Um, and that way, I can also report off whether there are promising more money if we give out reports, which would put us in another question because there are the people that can pay for the fines, and me making more money can actually support children or buying food for children. Um, but that would be the way I know myself. Is like if it would be given a fine to someone that it was not because they don't have the money, then I could actually ask them and say, hey, listen, this is why I do that. This is what I do with that. Can I write you a fine? And that would be a donation, or do you want to tackle it in another strategy? Um, and that would probably be a good way to begin to fundraise to save children from death in concentration camps. Israel kidnapped a lot of children, not just Yemeni children. And the ability of a child to go on the train, to go on the bus, to travel somewhere, to get the fuck out is exceedingly important. And with my money, I could buy them tickets to do so legally so that they go under the radar.